family. It's your sister, Reverend Jocelyn, here, and welcome to another episode of Faith on the Journey. If this is your first time tuning in, we welcome you. We're so glad that you are here and want you to know that we're committed to helping you strengthen your faith, heal your heart, and discover a sense of community. And we do so through a variety of ways by connecting you with a team of Christian counselors who care about you, who would love to journey with you on your healing journey. We also offer trauma healing trainings across the country. And you can learn about these resources and so much more by visiting our website at faithonthejourney.org. Again, that is faithonthejourney.org. Now, today's a special episode because I have the opportunity to interview a colleague of mine who is an amazing counselor. She's so passionate about this work, and she's going to help me in engaging in a conversation around a difficult subject around healing from infidelity. And so I am excited to introduce to you for the show Dr. Jennifer Davis. I'm going to read a little bit about her bio, but I'm telling you, she is a powerhouse here. Now, Dr. Davis is deeply passionate about uplifting and giving voice to those who are often overlooked and unfairly judged by society. With expertise in birth to five attachment, human sexuality, trauma informed care, she helps individuals who feel stuck, hopeless, or disregarded to discover new meaning, inner resilience, and healing. Whether someone's struggling with grief, unforgiveness, a major life transition, the pain of abuse, infidelity, Dr. Davis or Jennifer walks alongside of them to help them on their healing journey. Now, Dr. Davis holds a doctorate in Christian counseling and has over 20 years of counseling experience. She specializes in supporting individuals who've experienced divorce, infidelity, grief from miscarriages, abortions, and illness. Additionally, she has extensive experience counseling survivors of sexual and domestic violence, as well as individuals struggling with PTSD. Now, as a divorcee and a parent in a blended family with 8 children, Jennifer, you are just so busy. Jennifer has personally endured the pain of multiple miscarriages, survived emotional abuse, and walked with her children through the trauma of sexual abuse. Through God's radical healing, she has moved beyond trauma and now dedicates her life to helping others to do the same. And so I am so excited to welcome Dr. Jennifer Davis to the show. Dr. Davis, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, well, I appreciate you accepting my invitation. And when I invited you, I'm like, man, Dr. Davis can talk about a number of subjects. Which one makes the most sense? And I remember us having one of our one-on-one meetings together, and you were sharing some insight with me about the trauma of infidelity. And I'm like, you know what? This could absolutely be a powerful show because sadly, so many people face this challenge in their marriage. And so one of the first things, Dr. Davis, I would love for you to talk about is actually the different types of infidelity, because I understand that sometimes people can just look at it as the physical sexual act that causes
Yeah.
infidelity, but we know that there's so many different other forms. So can you just break that down for our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are so many different types of infidelity. And infidelity can kind of mean something different to everybody too, right? So, I mean, I think the one that everybody knows is, someone that has a sexual relationship outside of relationship, whether that's marriage or a committed relationship, whatever that looks like in the season of life for you. Um and then there's also emotional infidelity, where someone is starting to have like an emotional affair. That's a term that's kind of become a little bit more popular in the last decade, maybe 15 years, especially with the rise in internet and social media and people reconnecting with friends. That's become a little bit more prevalent. And then there actually can even be things that, fall under the umbrella of infidelity, such as like financial infidelity. People that are running up tons of debt or spending money they don't know about, or controlling the finances and not giving their spouse or partner any access to them. I mean, and then there are other sort of like micro infidelities that can kind of come up in relationships, but those would probably be the three biggest categories that I see in my practice and working with our clients.
Wow. And I am curious about the emotional and psychological wounds that one might face when they find out that their partner has committed infidelity.
Yeah, I mean, it's so vast. And I really dislike it when people say that because, like as a therapist and as a psychologist, I want to like give people like this is exactly what you're going to experience, right? Like here's the steps, here's where you're going to go, here's how you get from A to B, here's what you're going to feel. Like, man, if I could get that formula,
There's no formula.
I know there is no formula, but I mean it's so different. I will say that there has never been a client that I've worked with, or even through my own personal experience, that didn't feel at least these emotions. So, betrayal, that loss of trust. What does that look like? Anger, and anger and sadness go right hand in hand. And then, then it kind of can go in a little bit of different direction depending on the person. There can be a level of grief, especially if they decide due to the infidelity they cannot continue the relationship. There's grief for grieving the relationship and the future of what they thought was going to look like, or even sometimes for people that do decide to continue the relationship, there's grief in the fact that they have to grieve the relationship that they thought they knew they had, right? And then for other people, it can just be a series of many different emotions. Some people feel relief actually because they're like, I thought I was going crazy. Like I felt something in my spirit. And now I'm like, okay, now I'm like, I'm actually happy this came to light because I can move forward. So it's so different for each person. It really is.
Mhm. Yes, and the choice of how to move forward is gonna look different for everyone because when finding this out, you might share and confide this with some trusted friends or people from your church, and they might try to tell you what you should do in response. But we know that this is a personal decision. And if someone is in a situation where they found out that their partner has stepped out on them in whatever type of form of infidelity, what are some of the questions that you ask a client to help them to process and think through their next steps?
Yeah, wow, that's a wonderful question. So I always start with like, where are you at in this process? Where are you at in this journey? One, because my job as a psychologist and as a trauma healing guide is not to tell people what to do. My job is to walk alongside them in this journey to give them insights. In all of my sessions, I always pray beforehand, and every single prayer might look a little different, but there's always this standard thing that I pray every time of allowing God and the Holy Spirit into our session, and that we move in the way that only He can move, that we're listening to His voice as we're working in conjunction with each other. And I think that's so important because it's not my job to tell somebody you should end this relationship. It's not my job to tell somebody you should stay in this relationship. Like the other thing that I always tell people, and this isn't necessarily a question, but it's always something that I do with my clients, is I say, we need to pray for direction from God. We need God to open the doors that you need to walk through and close the ones that you don't walk through, right? I can say from my personal journey, I stayed in my marriage longer than people thought made like sense, right? Like they were like, oh, you should be done. There's a biblical reason to leave. But at the end of it, I hadn't been released from my marriage yet. And that was because looking back, I can see there were things that God had to work on in me before He could release me to go to that next step. Right. And that didn't mean that, like, once I decided to file for divorce and move forward, that I was like healed. There was still a lot of work that had to come, in a lot of areas that I had to allow God to touch my heart. But giving people the opportunity to really sit in front of God and say, okay, God, what is it what you want me to do? Are you asking me to stay? Are you releasing me from my marriage? Are you like, where do I need to go with that? I think that's a big one that I always go through with my clients. And then also, I ask them, in your perfect world, what would the outcome be? Because sometimes people are surprised by their answer to that question, really, because they think they know what they want. And then when you ask them that, they're like, oh, I didn't expect that to come out of my mouth, you know? And then it's also like working through, this is between you and the person that you are in a relationship with and God. There's nobody, like, I always encourage people to seek wise counsel, but you have to be very careful of where that wise counsel is coming from, right? Because sometimes even people that are wise give us counsel that comes from a place of hurt, or a place in an area that they maybe have not healed from, or also it can also come from someone who just loves you so much they don't want to see you go through anything, right? And they're like, you just need to leave, you need to be done with this, forget about it, move on, find somebody else, go out and live your best life. God says in the Bible, if there's infidelity, you should leave. It's biblical, go on, and so it's really, I always encourage people, you need to be very prayerful about who you seek your wise counsel from.
Ah, good advice. Absolutely. Because ultimately, I know that God speaks to us and God will direct us as it relates to where we should go. But sometimes it's hard. And one of the things that you spoke of, I kind of want to go a little bit backwards towards some of the emotions that one might feel when dealing with this this experience that's very difficult. You talked about anger, and I think sometimes in the church, we try to move people quickly through this human emotion without allowing people space to explore it, to feel it. In episode 151 of our podcast, I had a whole episode on anger. And so check it out if you haven't already. But for you, Dr. Davis, I would love for you to just kind of speak to that in terms of some of these human emotions and how it's important to be able to explore it and not suppress it.
Well, I always say this, there's kind of, when you're looking at infidelity, right? People automatically go to the anger they have towards the other person. And then if there was like a third person involved, if it was like an emotional affair or a sexual affair, there's sometimes anger there. Not sometimes, probably almost every time, if I'm being honest. But what people sort of overlook is the anger they feel at themselves. Because they're like, I should have known better. I should have seen this. And honestly, with a lot of my clients, we are able to work through some of the anger that they feel towards the other person, whether it's their partner, the person their partner had an affair with. But it's the anger that they feel towards themselves. And then also, even the anger they feel towards God. That's a big one. People are like, oh, I'm not allowed to be angry with God. Who says? Like, literally, God can handle our emotions. He gave us these emotions.
Absolutely.
I don't often share, like, a lot of intimate details in my sessions because, that's my client's time. But, there are times that I tell people, and I share this when I speak openly about my testimony and the things that I've walked through. Like, there were times in my story when my prayers to God should never have been heard by anybody because the words coming out of my mouth were not Christian or godly. I'll just admit that. I admit it freely because I was so angry. I was angry with myself. I was angry with the situation. I was angry with God because I felt like I had prayerfully entered into the marriage that I was in. Um, and then, but I had to have those prayers. I had to have those moments to really work through them. And that goes back to like what you were saying. Like, if we just hold those emotions in and we're like, I'm fine. God has given me peace and all this. And God will. I'm not saying that God won't give you peace. You will get to the peace, but it is not true peace. Or I'm a firm believer that it's not true peace if you haven't really allowed yourself to feel the emotions. And the beautiful thing about that, I think, like, is as you're walking through these seasons and you're walking through this mess, feeling those emotions and allowing God to work on your heart is what allows you to come out of the other side without roots of like thorns in your heart and your spirit, right? Like, that's where I feel like when we don't work through that, that's where those, like, seeds of bitterness get sown in, or seeds of resentment get sown in. And then we take those into our future relationships, whatever they, if they're romantic, friendships, coworkers, whatever it might be, even our relationship with ourselves, and unfortunately also our relationship with God. And that's, we have to work through those emotions.
Yeah, and working through it, I think is a process that is painful but necessary, first of all, like, because
It's
you have to
so
confront.
painful,
You
so
yeah,
painful.
I'm telling you, it's the ugly cry, it's all the
Uh-huh.
things, but I
Yep.
think this is why it's important to have a counselor such as yourself who can help you to have a safe space, first of all, to
Right.
process it, not judge you, not be like, you shouldn't
Oh, yeah,
feel
no.
this anger. No, no,
Right.
no. It's normal to feel
Right.
this.
I mean, I have clients in my sessions and they'll start, saying some colorful language and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm
Colorful.
so sorry." And I'm like, "Girl, whoever you are, like your language, it's fine. This is a safe like I always say like, that like social media thing like we listen and we don't judge. That's like really big now. I'm was like the original, we listen and we don't judge. Like that's where therapists were 20 years ago. Like it is fine. Like I am here and I can see sometimes you need those words because you're having a hard time conveying a very powerful emotion, like it is okay.
It is okay. It is okay. And as you're working through it, okay, you're dealing with all these like explosive emotions. And then you also are trying to make a decision. And sometimes our gut reaction is like, I'm done, like, but sometimes if we slow down, we really don't want to be done, but we're so hurt, right? And so I think that this is one of those things where actually having, again, wise counsel, maybe taking pause, definitely seeking God on what the next step should be is important. But say, for instance, someone is cheated on and the partner who engaged in the infidelity, they apologize, they come clean, it's out in the open, and you decide to try to work through it, but then the partner commits the act again. Now we're having like a habit. In a case like that, which I'm sure you've seen before, like what does the partner who has been cheated on or betrayed, what do you suggest that they consider at this point?
So that's, another great question. It goes back to I don't ever want to tell people what to do with their lives. I think they really need to listen and be honoring to what God has planned. But usually at that point, I start to tell people, I think at this point, we need to, if we haven't already, consider a separation. And a separation doesn't always mean a divorce, right? And I think that's what a lot of people are under the misunderstanding. If you separate, it means that we're filing divorce paperwork tomorrow. And that's not what it means. Sometimes a separation is a really beautiful time of pause, right? So, like the person that's committed the infidelity can seek individual counseling, right? And work on the issues that are leading them to engage in these extramarital affairs, right? And then the person that has been cheated on, that has been like the victim, has an opportunity to also seek individual counseling to really work on through the emotions, through the trauma of what they're experienced, because it is a trauma. I mean, no matter which way you cut, it is a trauma. And then at some point, there needs to be a point where there's, a conversation of how do we now try to move forward? Do we move forward and try to repair a friendship because we need to co-parent if there are children involved, but we move forward with a divorce? Do we move forward completely separate and we do a divorce, like we move to that stage and we just thank each other for the beautiful times we had and we work to heal from the times that were not beautiful? Or we start to come together to work on reconciliation? And I always tell people there needs to be a very careful plan in place. And that's where working with like a couples counselor, along with individual therapy is so important, because you need to have the space to where you can just go and vent, because no matter which path you choose, there's going to be difficulties on it, right? Like there's just no way around it. So you need to have that space where you can vent, but then also if it is a point where you guys are trying to work on like a friendship for co-parenting or to work on repairing the marriage, you also have a couples counselor that can walk you through together of like, hey, here's how we can, looked at like facts versus feelings, because that's a lot of things when couples try to like start having conversations. It's like all these emotionally driven conversations, but we need to look at like, okay, what are the facts of the situation? And let's operate in the facts. So, that's what I always tell people. You need to listen to God, and you need to really figure out what is he calling you to do in this. And sometimes the hard part is for the person that's been cheated on, their desire really can be to save the marriage. Even if it's happened multiple times, they're still like, I've made this commitment, I made a vow, I'm going to see it through till death do us part. Let's separate and let's try to work it on, come back together. They're doing everything, but I have seen times where the person that's been victimized is doing everything and the other person just isn't ready either. And sometimes that happens.
And that's so painful, right? Because, you know, a marriage cannot be sustained by one person alone long term, right? Like I've seen the analogy of, when they're describing a destructive marriage where you're in a paddle boat. And ideally, if the couples together both are paddling, one got the right side, one has the other. But imagine if only one spouse is committed, doing the work, trying to repair, and the other one is not. It's as if that one spouse is the only one paddling, and you're going around in circles, not going
Over and
anywhere.
over
Oh,
again. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. And that's
Hmm.
that's a terrible way to live, right? And so I think, I really appreciate the advice that you have given as it relates to both the individual and the couples, because I believe that individual and couples counseling, that is, to clarify, because if you're only doing couples counseling but you're not doing the individual work as well, then it won't be as nearly as effective, I believe, in helping you to draw your own
Right.
conclusions and to heal.
Yeah. Well, and 100%. And also, you have to remember a marriage is two individuals coming together, right, to make a relationship work. And so if you are focusing all your time, energy, efforts, resources to just work on you as a couple, you're missing the big part about who you guys are as individuals, right? And a lot of times when I get individuals or couples that I work with that are in my, office, so to speak, because I see most of my clients virtually, they've gotten to a point where they don't even really know who they are as a person anymore. And a lot of times that happens naturally for women too, as we become mothers, and even for men as they become fathers. We kind of get so caught up in that role, especially if you're a working parent as well, or even if you're stay at home parent, like you're just like, who am I as a person, right? And I'm not saying that's like what causes, infidelity, but when couples don't know who they are as an individual, it's hard to be a part of, a partnership because you don't even really know what you're bringing anymore to it. And so that, to me, every couple that I work with, I highly encourage, if not almost mandate it, that they are also doing some sort of individual counseling because it's just so vital.
Totally agree. This is so good, Dr. Davis. We're going to pause briefly for a quick commercial break. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about the process of rebuilding trust after your world has been shattered due to infidelity. So we'll be right back.
There are certain moments in life that wreck us. Whether it's the unexpected loss of a loved one, divorce, betrayal, or abuse at the hands of someone who was supposed to protect us. Trauma can completely shatter our world. Now, many of us have heard that time heals all wounds, but time without the proper care for our emotional wounds will leave us feeling stuck at the source of our pain. We might be able to hide our pain from others, but deep down inside, we know it's still there. If you are tired of running from your past, I encourage you to take one courageous step and schedule a free informational session with a member of our counseling team. Our Christian counselors can provide a safe, supportive environment to process and heal your pain. They understand how difficult the healing journey can be and will walk alongside of you the entire way. Stop running from your past. It's time to heal. Visit faithonthejourney.org for more information on how you can get started today.
Welcome back from our commercial break. So, we have had such a great conversation thus far and exploring the healing process, going to counseling, doing the individual work. But I have a question, Dr. Davis, as it relates to if someone or a couple decides, okay, we are going to work through this. All right, you made a decision, but now the real work begins. because it's not just the decision. Now it's like a lot of repairing and rebuilding, particularly around trust. So, can you tell me what are some of the steps that you or advice that you give couples as it relates to rebuilding trust after that trust has been shattered?
Yeah. So one of the things I always tell people is you kind of need to write a list of like non-negotiables, right? Like these are the things that I'm no longer comfortable with in our marriage. And actually, honestly, I think both partners could do that. This is a list of non-negotiables. And I usually tell people list like 3 to 5 because any more than that, it just becomes very overwhelming. It's hard to stay on task with them. It's hard to even like sort of meet those expectations, right? Um, so a list of non-negotiables of things that like we are not going to allow this in our marriage anymore, or these are things that we need to start doing, like having a regular date night or checking in once a week with each other, or phones off by 8 p.m. or whatever it is. It's different for every couple, but a list of non-negotiables. I always very lovingly, because this is hard to hear sometimes, tell the person that has been cheated on, you can't be the scorekeeper of the trust. And that's a hard thing to hear, but they can't be. They can't be over here like checking, okay, they did this. Okay, check. Oh, they didn't did this. That's a deduction. Oh, they did, like you have to like give the trust. But then I also as equally lovingly try to tell the person that has committed, the infidelity, you have to be okay with the fact that you are going to have to work really hard to earn this trust. Sometimes, and this happens with a lot of people, forgiveness comes a lot quicker than trust, right? Like they've forgiven them, they've made this decision, they're working through that, but the trust takes a lot longer to come to them. And so I always tell the person that, has committed the infidelity, you might have to be open to things like, hey, here's the password to my phone. Or, hey, we might need to share social media accounts for a while. Or, hey, I just want to let you know I'm leaving Jim's house and I'm going over to Joe's house real quick to pick something up in case you see me on Life 360. Here's where I'm at. So, and trust is always built in little actions, right? If people think a lot of times it's these grand gestures, I'm taking you away for this romantic vacation. I've done this. I'm showing you how committed I am. I'm ready to be back with you. But trust is always built in the smallest things day to day. And that's so vital to, focus on as you're in that process of repairing the trust in a relationship.
That is wise. That is very helpful. And in that process, realizing that for the person who was traumatized by the loss, I think one thing that might happen sometimes, Dr. Davis, is that they're emotionally reactivated. Some people will use the term triggered by something. And I guess my question is, how would you encourage them to manage their triggers, for lack of a better word, or be mindful of the fact that they're being reactivated in that moment? What would you offer them for help?
So that's where I think individual counseling is so important, like and so vital, because you can start to work through those triggers with a trusted, trauma healing guide, counselor, psychologist, social worker, whoever it is that you're seeking, because they are going to be able to give you like specific tips and tricks to whatever your trauma is. But I always tell couples one of the big things is you start to notice that you're, being emotionally reactive. That's what I call it. People, like you said, people call it being triggered. Is it's okay to pause. And I usually give my couples like, you need to have like a safe word. Like, this is our pausing word. Like, okay, I feel like I am getting emotionally triggered right now. So I am pausing this conversation until I feel like I can better handle it. Or the other person might say, hey, I feel like I'm being emotionally, triggered by, or I'm emotionally reacting based on something you're saying. I need to pause this and let's resume it at a different time. The key to that, though, because there is a key to that, is you do then really try to have to set up a time to have that follow up conversation. And so there is a little bit more, and you learn this as you're walking through this, right? As you gain just more wisdom, as we naturally do. You might say, hey, I need to pause this. I'm like, my emotions are getting the best of me right now. And then as you gain wisdom and you're working through things, you can say, you know what, I need to pause this. I need to go for a walk. I need to calm myself down. And then can we resume this conversation in 1 hour? It looks like we have some space, right? So it's a little bit different depending where you are in the process when you can pick it back up. But it's so important to pick it back up, because one of the things that I see happen a lot of times for people when they're trying to rebuild trust is they have these conversations, and then people start getting emotionally reactive, and then it becomes a fight, and then people become resentful, and then they're like, well, see, I could never trust you. And then it's, oh, well, see, you never listened to me anyways, and so then it just like it's bringing up all this trauma again, when they were really meaning in a very like healthy way at the beginning, in a very loving manner, to just try to have a conversation, right? And that's again why individual and couples counseling is so important, because as you're rebuilding trust, you're also rebuilding how to communicate, because most of the time in infidelity situations, communication has been compromised in many different ways, right? So it's really just learning to say, we need to pause, because this is not healthy for myself or for you at this point, but more so, it's not healthy for our relationship or honoring to God at this moment. So let's pause and we'll pick it back up, whatever that looks like for the couple.
Very helpful, very helpful. So at the first half of our conversation before the commercial break, we talked about really two roads, right? One road is someone saying, you know what, I don't want to move forward in this relationship. I love you, but I'm choosing to separate. And the other road is working through it. I want you to talk about how the healing journey might look on both sides. And so let's start with if the couple decides to stay together and work through it. Based on your professional experience, are there any testimonies of like healing or things that you've seen to encourage someone who's gone down that path, who might feel like this sucks completely? I don't know how we're ever going to make it through it. Talk about like maybe like down the road what you've seen to give them hope.
So I think, honestly, in all reality, if you decide to stay, you have to look at it this way, that like you have to be at a place where you're prayerfully entering this next chapter to repair your marriage or your relationship, right? And part of that is you're gonna have to grieve the relationship that you once had, because it's never going to look the same. And in all reality, you probably don't want it to look the same, because we kind of got to where we were at, right? So it's understanding that you have to get to a point where you can see the other person through God's eyes, but also hold them to your human standards, which is a really hard thing to juggle. There has to be place for grace. Again, it goes back to not being like the keeper of the forgiveness, right? Like the check mark boxes person. That's where that grace of seeing them through, okay, you are a son or a daughter of God, and I need to give you some grace and things. I can't expect you to do things 100% perfect. But also, I do have standards and I do have these non-negotiables, and these are things I can no longer compromise on, because me compromising on these things before was not fair to you, on either side, whether it's the person that was cheated on or the person that wasn't cheated on, because those compromises are what led to the infidelity. And then it's really sort of setting that roadblock, or the roadmap, either not a roadblock, a roadmap of like, here's where we want to be. What are we working towards? Because obviously the goal is, okay, we decided to stay, we're going to repair a marriage. But what does that look like? It looks completely different for every single couple. So you need to sort of make like, goals, and sometimes with deadlines, depending like what it might be. Like, this is how we're going to get from point A to point B to point C, back to complete healing and restoration. But I can tell you, I've walked enough couples through it to know there is absolutely a chance at complete restoration. Like, I've sat with some couples in that first session, and I'm like, woo, we are in for a ride. Okay. And then they'll be back in a few months as we're working through things, and they're like, we have decided, we both heard from God, we want to repair this marriage. And I'm like, okay, like, let's do this thing. Okay, how are we going to do this? Like, let's pray together. Let's get in the spirit. and I've seen so many beautiful testimonies that I'm like, man, God, like, and they really are. There's no way that those marriages could not have been repaired without God doing his divine work in them.
That's awesome. That's awesome, Dr. Davis. And on the other side of the coin, if someone chooses to leave as a
Mhm.
result of the infidelity, I want you to talk about maybe just either testimonies of how healing is possible or just their role towards healing after leaving, because that is a process to walk out as well.
Oh, absolutely. I think, in both situations, actually, Reverend Jocelyn, whether someone chooses to stay or doesn't choose to stay, there's still some things they very much have in common, right? Forgiveness has to happen. You cannot move forward to repair a relationship or to walk forward in faith of ending a relationship without forgiveness. Number one, that has to happen. And it's not just forgiveness for the other person. Again, it goes back to what we kind of talked about in the first half of the show, forgiveness for yourself too. Because a lot of times we turn these things inward and we get resentful, we get angry, we get bitter, and we don't forgive ourselves. I should have known better. I should have seen this, And so I always tell my clients the goal, if you're deciding to move forward without, repairing the marriage, is you need to make sure that you are repairing yourself. And that is so vital. And then, repairing yourself in any cracks that the infidelity caused in your relationship with Jesus and with God and Father and Holy Spirit and all, however you see them, that needs to be repaired too. Because the goal is for whichever path you take, is that you are moving forward as a happy, healthy, whole person. That's always the ultimate goal. And healed. Happy, healthy, whole, and healed.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Dr. Davis, I don't want to leave this out. For the person who actually engaged in the infidelity, they might be struggling with such disappointment in themselves. Like, how did I let this happen? Tremendous guilt. What would you share with them?
So I always tell the person, that committed the infidelity, you have to get to a place of forgiving yourself too, right? Like I always say, people don't just wake up one day and decide they're going to go have an affair. Like no one wakes up on a Tuesday and is like, well, today's the day I think I'm going to go have an affair, right? Like there's always steps that have happened that have led up to that point. And so one of the things when I'm working with people who are the perpetrators of, the infidelity is I say, let's go back to the very beginning. And they always think the very beginning is when they had the affair, but that's not it. It's going back to the very beginning of what led to this decision making process, that this is a step they needed to take in their life. And usually it's because they're trying to escape something. They're trying to fill a void that they feel is missing in their current relationship, or even sometimes within themselves or the relationship with God. And that's kind of like that next step of that healing is, where are these voids and how can you allow God to fill the voids for you, right? And it's, and I think that's something else that's very important that I didn't touch on earlier when I was talking about the healing for a couple or even someone who decides to move forward without, repairing a relationship, is there's going to be things that you will have to allow God to heal from, or to heal within you, because you can't hold a human person to the same standards that we're holding our heavenly Father to, right? And that's so important as you're walking on this journey.
Yeah, very important. And Dr. Davis, you said one thing when we weren't recording that I would love for you just to share in front of our audience around God loving you through your poor decisions. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, and that's something I tell someone who, again, is the one that decided to, cause the infidelity, if you will, is that God loves you. God loves you through your poor decisions. He doesn't excuse your poor decisions because that's how much He loves us, right? There, that's like He loves us, and He's never gonna stop loving you because you had an affair. Like that love is, it just doesn't end. But He is gonna say, my child, that was not the right decision. And we need to figure out why you made this decision. And I think that's really where going back to having that wise counsel, godly wisdom, a godly counselor who can help you sort of work through some of those things is so vital to the healing process.
Definitely. And I feel like you are just that, Dr. Davis. You are someone who can really help a client walk through or couple walk through that healing process. And so I am grateful. Let me express my gratitude for having you on our team. You heard Dr. Davis refer to herself as a trauma healing guide. That's a term we use at Faith on the Journey, where we walk individuals through their trauma through a Christ-centered lens. And Dr. Davis loves this work. She's so passionate about it. And so
I love it.
it shows, and it's your calling and it's your anointing. And so I'm just grateful to have you engage in this conversation. I'm sure our audience was blessed by it today. So thank you for being on the show with us, Dr. Davis.
Well, it was honestly my pleasure. It's such a hard topic to talk about, but one that is so prevalent in today's world. So I appreciate you just having me on and being willing to have this conversation about a really tough topic, too.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Davis. And I'm excited because this is not the end of my conversation with Dr. Davis. I'm actually going to have a after hours quote unquote conversation with her to talk about her journey in becoming a Christian counselor, accepting her call. And so we'll make sure to have information about how you can watch that episode in the show notes. But if you were blessed by our conversation today and you're looking for a Christian counselor to walk with you because you've experienced infidelity in your marriage or in your committed relationship, I encourage you to check out Dr. Davis to learn more about her services. And you can do so by visiting us online at faithonthejourney.org. Again, that is faithonthejourney.org. So that's it for this episode, family. If you were blessed by it, you know what to do. Be sure to subscribe and share this episode with a friend. And until next time, you stay encouraged and you continue to keep your faith on the journey. I'll see you soon, family.